It's episode 13 of Incoming Aggression. 13 Froskurinn. That's a significant number to cretins who believe in superstition like that and don't understand how numbers work. So, ignoring that, straight into some League of Legends analysis. Here's the interesting thing about this show, Froskurinn. You probably maybe got a bit concerned, like, people have started to watch LPL now. They actually know it's a thing. Some people are even attempting to inform themselves. Now that they have English casters that people don't feel the need to just inherently hate, now they can even, and also they can recognize that they are the same gender and relate to them. They can now watch LPL and even start to learn about the players and the scene and start to follow it like almost a sport, almost, just not really, but almost as if it was a sport. They can watch it, and now a lot of people have a lot more opinions about EDG and LGD and WE, and you notice the community in general has gotten a lot more informed, even on Reddit. But yeah, you see there's a lot more people talking about it than before when it was quite a niche interest. So you might have thought, well, as time goes on, it's going to degrade some of my value because more people are getting to know about the scene. People are getting, as they've watched more seasons, they have more background info. But then LPL, apparently Tencent heard about that, and they actually, because they're the anti-Riot, they have to exist in opposition to what Riot do. And if the two ever meet, the universe explodes. They actually decided to help you out. So what they did was they decided to help you. They would tell every single team, you've just got to mix your whole roster up. And then EDG was like, what do you mean? We just won a first international big tournament for China in ages. We beat SK Telecom. They were like, no, you still got to definitely change your lineup completely. They were like, what? Which position will we change? Nearly everyone's good. And they were like, just get rid of the top laner, I guess. Get some guy from Hong Kong or something he was one of the best players. Arguably MVP of. And what about the mid lane? You can't remove him. He just beat Faker. They were like, nah, he's got to go as well. Got to bring in Bai Mei. Who is he? It's some guy who used to play for Blaze for one game about 2 years ago. What the fuck's going on, Froskurinn? What is this?
Well, you are correct that every single roster has been changed up as to almost. As to why, I mean, there's a couple of good roster moves. Don't get me wrong, we talked about this earlier, but U to Snake was an amazing roster move. I'm really excited to see him perform on that team. They're doing exceptionally well. As far as EDG are concerned, the one thing that I can say about EDG is that their goal was always to create two sister teams, and effectively they brought up a lot of their players from their sister team from the LSPL. And this is always they've been really transparent in this, that this is what they wanted. They wanted two full-fledged squads because they wanted to scrim in-house and kind of grow and develop talent that way. And what they're saying, why they're using Bamey and why they're using Amazing J, is that they're trying to develop talent. So I don't understand what's going on behind the scenes, but it's very feasible to me that because they're in the beginning of the split, because they just won MSI, that they could be trying to create a pseudo-sister team, because effectively on their roster, they have a full-fledged, 5 separate players in every single position, and that they're just creating two sister teams to scrim internally and help build up and hide strategy that way. I know that Aaron, the coach for EDG, was very much into OGN. That's very much an OGN type of strategy. So this is my speculation. I have no idea what's actually going behind. But obviously they're willing to tank their seeding and placement and performance just so they can give Amazing J and buy me some boost time.
I know this has happened mildly in the past. Okay, teams have made changes even when they were a top team, etc. But surely, in China, there's still never been anything on this level. A lot of the top teams still kept similar lineups and cores. Maybe they changed one player,
Well, OMG just did change out their starting roster. But no, I don't think to this level, especially after China finally won on a world stage, to then immediately see the roster, and particularly probably the most important player, the captain of the team, Coro, who definitively was the best top laner at MSI, to immediately see him benched. I know that there was some, I'm not going to call it drama, but Coro hadn't re-signed with EDG, and he actually tried out with OMG because his contract, because originally Coro was from when EDG first became a team, and EDG's players have always been very well-paid players. At one point, they were the best Chinese-paid players in the league, but since the Korean inflation and buying all Flame and Acorn and bringing over these superstars, obviously the contract prices have gone up. So it was speculation that Coro wasn't re-signing with EDG, was trying out to other teams just so he could drive up his own contract price, especially after his performance at MSI. So, I mean, it's kind of disconcerting to hear that and then immediately see him benched. So I don't know if there's some sort of internal struggle going on. I doubt it, but that is on the table.
Are there any concerns from you, since we'll start off with EDG here, that this means that going forwards, okay, developing talent's one thing, because we should mention again, you always have to remember, specifically with China, since you play 44 games just in the regular part of the split before the playoffs even begins, it's true, there is a lot of space to test other people out. Like, you can give a starter 30 games and still have a bunch left over, 14 obviously, to give to other players spread out throughout the season to give them a chance against a specific opponent or have them prep for a certain week. You know, that's actually a great concept. The question is, going forwards, will someone use that approach when it actually matters, you know? Like, have there been any signs to suggest that the 5-man lineup which won MSI for EDG is not the lineup we'll see again?
I don't believe so. I don't think... Bamey, it's a little bit curious over Pawn. Like, I think if you look about play styles, because this is what's important, is like these subs, how are they affecting the team, how are they changing the team, and is this talent worth developing? So Bamey versus Pawn, it's very much kind of like a, I'm not going to say Easy Hoon versus Faker, because that's like the standard everyone uses, but it's like Pawn versus you. Bamey reminds me really much of how you plays the game, controlled mage style, emphasis more on team fighting versus lane dynamics. And I actually think Bamey's better at team fighting than Pawn is, but Pawn's much superior in his 1v1 and laning talents. And I don't think that Bamey's as good as you, just because he's not as consistent with game impacting like ultimates and things like that. Like, whereas you will find that massive Ziggs bomb or the amazing Oriana shockwave, Bamey's a little bit less consistent there. So it makes sense to me that they would develop talents that way. As far as Amazing J and Coro are concerned, though, Amazing J is like the Zion Spartan of China, I think is what I'll call him. He's very much...
Everyone makes fun of Amazing J, though, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of like, in the Western Chinese League of Legends scene, he's kind of like a target of mockery, and his name is only suggested in jest, basically.
He's always... Okay, to be frank, Amazing J would have been a solid and serviceable top laner if the scene hadn't suddenly been flooded with the best top laners in the world. It was just really unfortunate for Amazing J because he's always been consistent and he's always just been serviceable and probably the highlight of his team. That said, the teams that he's been on in the past have been the worst teams in LPL, so it's not hard to be the shining star there. But it's just unfortunate for him because his position got flooded with Acorn and Flame and Coro coming out of his shell, so he just kind of got the shit stick there. But he's a solid player. Like, he's serviceable, especially by LPL standards. He's just not a star. Could he be? I don't know. Obviously, EDG sees something there, but he definitely has a very different play style than what Coro has shown. Even when Coro goes like god tier carry mode, Amazing J's still like more extreme than that. He's all about the split pushing. He's always about trying out new and weird champions before. Like, he was the first guy to bring out the Hecarim top in China and just like really go with it. The Smite teleport Hecarim, like every single game, it had to be banned against them.
Can you explain to me why that scenario would even happen that you described, where maybe Coro, like, because obviously we're going to go into this later, but OMG, one of the players who actually was an obvious person to consider removing from that was Going, because he had a really poor previous split. But that means, from the way you're describing it, it sounds as if maybe OMG was like luring Coro in, he was thinking about, oh, maybe I should go there. Has OMG really achieved the status of sort of like old WE, where even if they've dropped off a little bit, like it's like the team that every player wishes they could play for, you know, if they got the opportunity? Like, because from the outside, to me, that's kind of crazy. Because if I was talking to Coro, obviously we'd have to have a translator. I would say like, well, you're already in like what now is going to be the legendary team. Like, you're in the team that's won a whole bunch of splits in a row, won all these tournaments. Like, there's no reason you should ever leave now. It doesn't matter if you think of OMG historically, maybe you used to look up to those players. None of that matters. You're on the best team now. There'd be no reason to. So, is this kind of the reasoning you think as to why he'd even consider that move? Okay,
this is going to sound really bizarre, and obviously the only reason I have this opinion is from speculation and like observing, like when I went to Shanghai and just kind of reading into like the background. And again, I'm trying to think of how to like say this non-offensively as possible. Culturally, I do not think that the Chinese players show much respect for authority, and this is how this is all going to tie. It's going to be weird. Like, if you think about the Chinese government, it has this reputation of being super corrupt, and like authority figures, high standing in China. Like, if you think about like how their society is structured, you can get screwed pretty easily and be on like the bottom. Like, there's a ton of players in league right now or in China playing for clubs simply because they can't afford an education or they can't get a job, so they just go to these clubs and they go into farm clubs to survive, to feed themselves. And so if you think about it this way, like the Chinese players, like if you think about the Korean players' culture, like they really respect authority. It's about the big brother, you know, listen to the coach. I'm sorry, coach, I won't argue. And then you have like the Chinese who are brought up with this mentality, you know, don't trust authority, get whatever you can. and like abuse every single advantage you can get because you're not going to get another chance. It makes sense the Chinese players would be very much more concerned about their salaries. There's been reports all throughout different clubs, not just EDG. Cool was probably the most recent one. Coro as well. Like, I want to make more money. Pay me more money. So it makes sense to me that Coro is trying to shop around different clubs just to inflate his price value.
Okay, let me ask you this then. So does that mean that from everything you said, like he was one of the early signings to EDG, maybe within EDG, he's one of the players who's on like an old style salary contract where he's just on not that much because he was just a guy brought into the team as kind of not really a famous player in any sense. And so they've had all the success since then. Now he is considered the best at his position. And hey, maybe there's even other players on his team getting paid fantastic amounts. And maybe a team like OMG targets him like, well, we'll just offer a massive amount just for him specifically. And that is actually overwhelmingly different. Like, is it possible? Because we've seen EDG's like living area. It looks incredible. Looks like they have all this money. Do you think it's possible maybe he's like undervalued within their team?
Well, his contract was one of the first contracts. Obviously, I don't know the intimate details, but yeah, that's a very fair speculation to make. And OMG has the highest paid Chinese players. That is an absolute fact. But if you're a Chinese player and you want like the most money, OMG is the club that pays you the most money. Obviously, it's Uzi. And likewise, EDG have an amazing facility, but OMG have a fantastic villa. It's funny because if you like look at all the teams and their different like living arrangements, it makes sense that EDG, like the star Chinese team, the most powerful, has like this specific facility and like these gorgeous grounds, and then OMG, they're like the big fan favorites. They've got like this villa. Snake lives in like an apartment.
Yeah, basically Chinese League of Legends is like sort of GTA, and like you get better. Like you think you've already got like some cool shit, but then like, oh my god, I just unlocked some even more cooler shit, and then you get like a helipad and stuff. Like
you have to unlock it.
Yeah, you just go to the next level.
Yep.
So let's ask for an analytical point of view. If EDG forwards a team for, let's say, majority of their games and they don't keep using Coro 1 all the time, what would that do to the team? What would it take away from them?
Their team fighting, for one. Amazing J is not a very good team fight player. He's much more about the split push, much more about pressure, the 1v1, drawing resources top. So it completely changes, again, the dynamic of EDG, and they've kind of gone through this transformation multiple times now, especially in reference to playing with Baime. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I can understand if you play Amazing J and Pawn, because they're both kind of do their own thing. Kelsey likes to call them the Darien of EDG. Like, they just run off and they draw all these resources, and then EDG does something else underneath on the map. But Baime and Amazing J, it's like you have a really good team fighting mid, or you have a better team fighting mid laner, and then you have like this top laner who can't team fight or peel at all. I mean, he can, just not to the same extent that Coro can do. And especially when you have a god tier ADC like Deft, who's still playing out of his mind. Now he only has Clear Love as his front line, so.
What about when you kind of done the differences there between Baime and Pawn? Before we go into the other teams, like we're going to go into some more specifics, obviously. Just from what we've talked about in EDG so far, should the expectation still be that EDG will win this league?
I believe so. I think that they still have massive amounts of talent, especially because the other teams seem to be dropping the ball. Although Snake is looking better, Xiaogu is looking. It's kind of hard to place them because we don't have a large enough sample size, but they look challenging and threatening. Invictus Gaming, I think, looks really nice because they're one of the few rosters that didn't change anything, so they just hit the ground running and are ready to go. But I still think that EDG will definitely be on top, or at least in the top 3.
So, there's 2 games this week for EDG. They play Snake first, so they actually immediately get the revenge match against good old you. What do you think of this matchup? I mean, the most interesting, obviously, would be as if they fielded Baime in one of the games versus you. That would be the matchup, right? The mirror match.
What's really interesting is if you watch Snake's games, they performed really well with you. Like, they just looked really cohesive, and it was really refreshing to see from Snake, because not only did their champion and draft phase change, but that they weren't prioritizing certain power picks that they had in the past. It was very limiting, because one of Snake's largest flaws was you could look at them in draft and look at their team composition and point at Bach and point at Crystal and be like, these are your 2 weak points. Now Crystal has changed up his champion pool. He's playing things like Sivir, which in the past he never did. It was all about those hyper carries. So like his champion pool got much more massive, and he's much more flexible to the team. But you plays more than just 2 champions, which before the Baka only played Azir and Xerath, really. So you now don't have like these holes in draft phase. And then they're starting to experiment a little bit with their compositions and how they play the game. They're not just that big team fighting team anymore. So it's like really cool to see Snake evolve and get better and use the talent they have. What's curious here, though, is, again, who EDG is going to field. If they field Baime versus you, and if they field Amazing J versus Flandre. Oh, right. I remember the first point I was going to make. He'd only been practicing with the team, because obviously he went with EDG to MSI for 4 days before the start of the LPL split. So they already had that amazing cohesion and success and performance, because Snake is on top of the standings right now, with 4 days of practice with their official new mid laner.
So who will win that match, EDG versus Snake?
I feel like it'll go 1-1. And I feel like Snake will probably fail when they try to do a new type of composition, like a rotation or a pick composition, just because they're not as refined at it, although they're starting to experiment with it. And because they are experimenting, I feel like the trend is going to continue, and they'll try it against EDG, and Depth and Clear Love will probably make some picks, because typically when China tries to run rotation compositions, they do it on the back of Sivir. She's got a ridiculous win record in LPL right now. I think it's 15-3 or something absurd like that, and they always go to that champion to help them play that type of game. And obviously that's then based on how your bot lane performance is going to do, and Deft is still playing like a god. I think when Snake go back to their standard 5v5, a much more practiced style, and especially because that also plays to use previous strengths in 2014 EDG, that's when Snake will beat EDG.
Do you think... Okay, and EDG also plays LGD. So a rematch of the final. Who will win this?
Completely different, though. I don't know when PYL is scheduled to come back. Right now, he's getting reconstructive surgery on his jaw. He had quite a big underbite.
Okay.
But without him, LGD looks like a mess. I'm trying to... And it's weird, too, because people are like, it's just the support player. It's just the shot caller. It's just the captain of the team. No. PYL is super controlling. I don't know if it's to the extent that Reaper was as far as his shot calling, but everything that I've heard about him, he's super controlling. He controls every aspect of the team, every aspect of all the players, their champion pools, things like this. So, and it's really reflective in LGD when you watch them recently that they have no idea what they're doing, and they really need PYL to come back. We call him the Chinese Mata for a reason.
Okay, just before we leave the Snake topic, obviously this is one of the few roster moves that happened, which first of all was a real roster move between teams, not just bringing in secondary players and putting them in the lineup, but secondly, makes sense for everyone. If EDG weren't going to use you, because they were nearly always going to go back to pawn in the lineup in terms of how it worked, then it made sense to have you, who's a good player, certainly, go to another team. And Snake was a team where, when you looked at the lineup, mid lane's definitely one of the positions where we need to potentially get a new player. So, on paper, this is the best move of the off-season in some ways, right?
Yep, this is pretty much, I think, probably one of the best moves that two Chinese teams have ever made. He was a fantastic mid laner. I considered him the true backbone of EDG in 2014. He played a very similar style, but he's very flexible. It's not like he can only play the control mage style. That's just what EDG demanded of him. He can also play assassins. He plays it a ton in solo queue. He said that his favorite champions are champions like LeBlanc and Zed. He showed some of his assassin play at Worlds, and he did fairly well in those games. So to see him on Snake, where now they've but benched Baka, don't have his champion pool issues, are able to use a player very similar in that style, so it's not like they can completely change their MO or their makeup of the team. They can go back to their strengths and just have you do what Baka did, but just do it better. But now they can look at broadening the horizons and testing out new things. So it's just about evolving Snake and adding more dimensions to their playstyle.
Do you think that Snake will be a top 3 team this split?
Yes. And
Is
it's not
that
just...
Are you bolder than that? I think you're starting to love Snake.
I really like you, so unfortunately I'm biased right there. Snake did prove... The thing about Snake is they were so strong in the regular season, which is 44 games. We keep talking. This is an insanely long season. They were at top of the standings, but if you remember past episodes, you're like, no, they've got these drafting issues. I don't like Snake. I don't like Crystal. Baka's so easily targetable. Once someone figures them out, they're just going to shut them down. And that's exactly what happened in playoffs. They got into a best-of-5 series. Draft phase just completely screwed them. They have 2 limited champion pools. So it's nice that we finally see a team immediately fix the things that were proven wrong in playoffs. Not just with the removal of you.
So that they are the anti-CLG.
Not just with the changing of Baime to you, but with Crystal. And I've been really hard on Crystal because his champion pool was a huge issue. Opening up to things like Sivir is massive, especially for how impactful that champion's been on the league. So it's not just you and Baka, it's also the AD carry as well.
Okay, going forwards, we mentioned LGD. So LGD is one of the teams where as soon as I saw EDG and OMG make their really weird roster moves,
you're like, it's their time to shine.
I was like, surely automatically, if LGD has their proper 5-man lineup, they should be the best team, basically, initially. Like, if PYL's back, shouldn't they be in position to potentially be an LPL champion this split?
Yeah, and what's also really concerning is that, home? So the thing about this coach, Korean coach, is that he was last split coaching 2 different teams. And this is actually, if you know, when he coached them and did their draft base for them, you can actually see, oh, so that makes sense. He coached Vici Gaming at the very beginning of last split for half the split. And then on the back half of the split, he started coaching LGD or working more intimately with them. Now for this current split, he's 100% signed to LGD. Like, he's on the roster and he's committed to that team. I think he saw Vici Gaming's roster. He's like, okay, I'm abandoning this sinking ship. But it was hilarious because then the very first game that Vici played, LGD didn't play that game. So I'm just like curious if he walked up and was like, hey, my team's not playing. Can I just help you guys out with draft phase? Because he was totally on the stage behind them. Or if maybe there's like a grace period where he officially transfers over. But they got us a true coach this time around. Unfortunately, PYL is leaving. So waiting for him to come back. But once he's back in, I mean, there's no excuse for LGD not to rise up. They've got their coach that helped them in the back half of the split when they did amazing in playoffs. They've got their all-star support player. They've looked really good across the board.
And they've gone right back to their old tricks where you play Acorn, Kennen, and then Flame is obviously a famous Gnar-only main.
Yep.
One-trick pony in many ways in League of Legends, you know. He can't play things like Kennen, you know. Still doing that, are we, guys? Okay. I thought that was at least ended, you know.
I want to clarify something because I get this question a lot. There's a penalty between changing players between 2 sets. So you have to submit who is playing a set before you play it. So anytime you see a ban penalty, then you can assume that they made a substitution there on the spot. So there's not a priority, like, say, if we win the first game for LGD, that we then play Flame. It's always Acorn, then Flame. And they preset that no matter what the matchup is, or at least in the last week, because there's been no ban penalty. So people always ask, like, do they only play Flame if Acorn wins? Well, Acorn lost, so why did they play Flame? Why didn't they play? They have it set. They know going in that's what they're going to do.
Which actually makes it more of a distinct, like, attempt to fuck with the enemy team, basically. Because the enemy team knows that you're going to use 2 different players, but then they also know they have to then practice for 2 different styles.
Except that they don't differentiate the styles between the 2 players for their specialty. Because Flame is playing Gnar and Acorn is playing Kennen. It would make sense if Acorn was playing Rumble and Flame was playing Kennen, but fuck that.
Are you ready for my bold statement, though, Froskurinn?
I'm ready.
You know I've given Acorn on this show a lot of credit for being like a really awesome hybrid player who has learned to play those carry champions quite impressively, actually.
Yep.
Of the 2 players who are playing the opposing styles, now it's not entirely fair because actually in the tank meta, Flame also just like spammed Dr. Mundo and Renekton like a shit ton, you know, so he could play those champions and sometimes he's very good on them. But of the 2 players playing the opposing style to what we would think of as their ideal approach, Flame's actually better at playing the opposing style. Like, his Gnar has gotten ridiculous now. His Rumble's pretty good.
And I definitely think there's truth to that. And I also think that it's important to note that even though they play the same champions, the way that they play these champions are also very different. Like, Flame's Gnar is very different from Acorn's Gnar, and likewise Acorn's Rumble and Flame's Rumble. They're both good, but they still have their very unique styles on those champions.
Well, what's funny is that's what I've always liked about Flame. Is like, it doesn't matter what. One of the things is it doesn't matter what champion he plays. He finds a way to still play it in his exact playing style. Like, he'll still try to outlane people playing Gnar. That's like, it's still his approach is just to get up on CS and just to push them in, push them under their tower. Like, wait for a kill opportunity if they try to like push back. Like, he actually plays them in some weird way, like he would play a carry top laner, you know, if he was playing Aurelia or something.
And it's also really helpful to Flame just because Black Cleaver is going to become a huge item for Gnar, and so it gives him more carry potential. But I agree, Flame's, from my estimation, watching him in the top lane, he'll always get not always, but he'll usually get a TP discrepancy on his own where he'll just force the enemy laner to back because they take too much poke. And then from there, and it's weird because you would think about this as like a Looper and Acorn type of thing, like making it a TP play advantage, but Acorn will get his TP advantage with a gank or something similar like that. Flame will typically get it on his own just through harass, and then they'll use the TP's bot lane and like pick up all those kills.
Did you see the 5-man narrow?
I saw it.
Did you see the flash?
Fion's gif.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, that's all that needs to be said about that. So, will LGD without PYL be able to beat M3, Masters 3?
Ooh. I want to say yes. Masters 3 is so hard right now. Like, if there's a team that I just have no idea where to put them, it's probably Masters 3. They're just so random. Dade is still performing. I mean, it's like hit or miss, like whether he's going to show up or not. Some games are fantastic. I mean, obviously he showed his Cassiopeia, which, I mean, before Dade has had like a really small but weird champion pool, and sometimes it's out of meta and sometimes it's perfect on meta. And so now he's finally like branching out to these big meta power picks that we saw at MSI, like Azir. So obviously he already had that one in the pocket, but pulling out the Cassiopeia and looked great on it. So that was really comforting for Dade, but I don't know. M3's hard, and LGD is even harder without without PYL. They just look so bizarre. But I think across every lane, like if we're just gonna match them up and try to make a guess, other than the mid lane, which is Godby versus Dade, and just kind of depends on what Dade is gonna do that day, LG pretty much outclass in every single like bot lane, top lane, even with Fan. I mean, you got Imp down there.
So here's the thing, you just said like it's hard to analyze M3. Well, good luck for you, because they're the team that play 3 games this week, the only team. So they play LGD, but then they also play WE and RNG. And for people saying RNG, who is RNG? That team is Royal Never Give Up. And let me just explain for a second. Okay? So in China, they pick like what they think is cool names, okay? So RNG is a pretty good acronym. That's a great acronym, actually. Very memorable. Problem is, RNG doesn't work for Royal Never Give Up. You see, there's a word there that isn't represented. That doesn't actually make any sense, China. That makes no sense whatsoever. So also, the way that you guys would say that would probably be like RNG. RNG. So you could have put the U on. Yeah, it would have worked. Cultural sensitivity. It's what I'm all about, Froskurinn. Anyway, so my M3 play against this team.
Yes.
And they play WE as well. Now, is Royal Never Give Up? That should be a win for M3?
I would say so, but it's... Okay, so here's the story of Royal Never Give Up, King, and Starhorn Royal Club. So obviously Starhorn Royal Club got relegated. That's totally fine. We can buy these new spots. So what happened is they bought Gamtee Spot, and they turned Gamtee Spot into Royal Never Give Up. So Starhorn Royal Club, I believe, still exists. It's just in LSPL. But now we have Royal Never Gives Up, which was formerly Gamtee. But there are no Starhorn Royal Club members on Royal Never Gives Up. It's Gamtee and King, because Starhorn Royal Club also bought King's Spot. And King is definitely not Starhorn Royal Club. It's entirely Starhorn Royal Club. It's Cola, Korn. Insect hasn't played yet, but he's on the roster. Name, Sync Dream, and Zero. So King is Starhorn Royal Club. Royal Never Gives Up is King and Gamtee.
If it's not that, by the way, guys, I know Westerners now again like are going to get drawn into like their own. They're going to get caught in their own cultural nuance, and they're going to think, wait a minute, I don't understand. Like, that's not a very good way to pretend that you're not buying a team and putting all the players on. To just call them Royal Club, and then for the other team, buy the team called King, and your whole theme's like royalty and all that sort of thing. That's not. It's like no, they're basically telegraphing that they're doing this. Like, it's allowed. They're doing it. They have money. Fuck you. That's like how China works. Okay, like this isn't some sort of subterfuge. This isn't like when Alliance suddenly existed, when EG also existed, and everyone's like, don't they have the same management? What are you talking about? These are 2 totally different companies. Like, it's not any of that shit. They're literally just saying like, nah, this is the new team now. Continue. Just like that continues on. So, M3... So, RNG, there's no reason to think anything good of them. It used to be Gamtee, for fuck's sake.
They have... The thing about Gamtee, though, is they had some really nice jewels on the team. They had their mid laner, Xiaohu, who I actually think is going to be very, very good. He's incredibly young. He's the first player that I've ever heard of to not be allowed to play in the LPL because he was too young. Like, they had this...
You have to be born first. You actually have to. It's like you have to pass the 3rd trimester, and then you're allowed to play in LPL, I believe. Because at that point, you're just old enough that the light from the camera that has to take a picture to give you that fake like birth certificate ID won't blind you as a child. Some they have very strict rules about it in China. Actually, Froskurinn.
Just imagining this little creature. It looks kind of like a bat. It's not a good visual. He's incredibly young. Probably 17, probably 18 on his Chinese ID. But he's really young, very talented. has a limited champion pool right now, but obviously this will come with time and come with experience. He is in meta. He plays a controlled mage style. His Azir is what he's well known for, and obviously Azir is a big power pick right now. And I definitely think that he's a star to watch for China, and as the splits go on, that he will become a top tier mid laner. He's shown some great progress already over the course of the split. And the thing about Gamti is that they started out really shaky, but obviously they didn't have their mid laner. As soon as they got their mid laner, it was still kind of like a crapshoot of like 1-1 splits down the road, but they definitely significantly got better over the course of the split, and by the end, they were not a super reputable team, but you couldn't just 2-0 them. It wasn't like they were easy points. And I think that they salvaged kind of the two best, not the two best, because I would think like their AD carry Teo was really good, and unfortunately he got the shit stick. But they have Let Me, the top laner, and they have Xiaohu, the mid laner. I definitely think that these two players are significantly better than Gamti's record showed. That said, they're flanked by King's bot lane, Wushin, and Lam, and King's jungler, or I always want to call him Lonely, XMLG. And he's not very strong right now. His champion pool's out of meta. It's a big issue for them. So I'm going to give it to M3.
Why does RNG have so many known top laners on their roster?
They also have Godlike, don't they?
Like, why is Godlike and Sky just chilling?
Sky needs to be replaced. He was a huge issue on the previous King roster. His champion pool was super suspect. He couldn't find correct engages. His play was just, and unfortunately for Sky, again, he looked so promising in the LSPL when he was playing to like his strengths and his carry style. And this completely changed when he got into the LPL. And it's almost like an Amazing J situation. If the LPL hadn't leveled up in all of their top lane talent the way that they did, he probably would have been fine. Probably would have just been serviceable. It's okay, you know, stay on the roster, get shuffled around to another team. But because he's stacked against people like Flame, like Acorn, like Coro, and even like Going, he just kind of fell off. He definitely needed to be replaced. Let Me is a direct and immediate upgrade. Still, the most concerning thing for me, for RNG, is their jungler, who is extremely inconsistent.
So, M3 versus WE. Who will win this one? Because you know the hype around WE is like they're the hipster pick where people are, I think that the team that went to IEM actually secretly always was the top 4 team in chat. We just didn't know because the poor record of the old team like handicapped them, but secretly they should have been like the 4th best Chinese. That's like the way people notice. A lot of them have a certain flair of a certain North American team, try to hype up this team, you know. What do you actually make of WE?
Well, WE haven't won a game yet. I don't think that they're very strong. I think that Spirit is trying to hard carry them, and it's just really painful to watch. Mystic, I've never been super high on Mystic. He has some games where he kind of goes off, or he's able to carry alongside Spirit, but he's not consistent at all, and I wouldn't consider him like an all-star AD carry, especially in the Chinese region. Conan is their starting support right now. I've actually been kind of impressed with Conan. It's weird too. I used to call him Conan the Barbarian. So Wei Xiao, when Wei Xiao was on WE, his support was always Conan. So he went from FCZF from the All-Star World Elite squad, and then he immediately went with this guy named Conan. And World Elite excelled in this time period where they had Conan. They excelled in the 2v1 lane swap because Conan cannot lane. He just didn't have the mechanics for it, but he was excellent at playing Leona and roaming around the map. So they would do this thing where they put Wei Xiao in a side lane, just farm by himself, and he'd just wait until he was super fed, then group up with the team and murder everyone. And his support would kind of roam around. It really helped shore up Conan's disability in lane to land skill shots and to be...
Basically, Wei Xiao was what Reckless should have been when he was on the old Fnatic. Like, you get left on your own, but you farm safely if you can. Avoid getting ganked. Your support wards everywhere, helps the team. And then you join the fight. The difference is, when Wei Xiao joined the fight, he's still main carry, whereas Reckless was, like, doing that, like, cleanup crew type shit, you know.
Janitorial style?
Yeah.
The cool thing about Conan, though, when World Elite made playoffs last year, and they barely scraped in over LGD, I believe, I'm trying to remember, they'd had their first Korean coach, and this was right when the first initial Korean migration came over, Insect, Mickey God, Khan, things like this. We saw the Nami pick, which is like, people are like, what, Nami? People play Nami all the time. No, in China, they did not play Nami. This just didn't exist at this time. It was like Annie, and that was pretty much it. Annie, Leona, hard engage. So this was your first time that we saw a disengaged champion. Now, Conan couldn't really play it very well, and then suddenly you had this new class of support rising up, like Kitties, and I'm trying to remember FCZF, who you could play like hard engage and disengage. It was like this evolution of support players, but Conan started it. He was actually really well known for his Vel'Koz support and his Leona support, and then he pulled out the Nami. So to see him again, because obviously we had him last split as well, and I guess between UJ and Conan, they're like, no, I don't want to play, put him in. No, I don't want to play, put him in. No, find a different support, which now they have Dada 7. Conan started this time around, but he brought out his Nami, and his Nami was actually pretty fucking good. He hit like these skill shots that I've never seen Conan hit before, and his mechanics in lane looked much stronger. So I don't know if World Elite got like a confidence boost, and unfortunately it's going to go downhill again or what, but I was really impressed with Conan. I thought his Nami pick looked really good. Aluka has Scion banned against him every single game, no idea. And Spirit's trying to hard carry them. And that's World Elite.
So you missed a player out though. You didn't tell me about Xie. The very hyped Xie.
Xie is a solo queue god. He's a very mechanical, talented player. Unfortunately, he has no idea how to play in a team 5v5 environment. Yep.
In what respect? I mean, he still has games where he'll pick like assassin type player, go crazy.
Yeah, but that's a pick style. Like when you play an assassin, obviously it would make sense that a solo queue player would go off on an assassin because it's very similar to solo queue. You're very self-sufficient. You have your own escapes. You don't have to rely on the team to help you position with that. You don't have that big AoE ultimate that your team's really relying on to make sure that the team fight goes successful. It's not like you have the Shockwave or the Mega Inferno Bomb or anything like that. The Emperor's Divide. You just run into the back line and you murder someone. Oh, you want to go split push because you're playing Zed? It's cool. Go split push because then you just have to play with pressure points. Like, Xie falls apart when you put him in a 5v5 dynamic, which that's the problem with China, is that it's all about the 5v5 right now. The team fight is huge. It's always been a region that excels in team fighting and pulling the trigger and being super aggressive and having those big 5v5s. And unfortunately, Xie is not as talented as other mid laners in that regard. His 1v1 is incredible. So World Elite will always do well if they're able to just snowball off of their 1v1, just brute force mechanics. But unfortunately, that hasn't been the case for them.
Where do you actually see them among the overall? I mean, there's 12 teams, so what's the range for WE in your mind?
I don't think they'll rise above where they were. They finished 8th. So I think they'll probably stick between 6th and 8th, kind of mid-tier, low-tier team.
So in terms of just those results, M3 play WE and RNG, should they be expected to win both?
I think I give the favorites to Masters 3 just because I think they're more refined in what they're trying to... It's weird, too, because, like, RNG, they honestly have no idea what they're doing. Two teams came together. They're trying to mesh their play styles. They're very young players, not just on Gamtee's side, but also on King's side. So it makes sense that they would be really inconsistent and not kind of have like a lot of direction. So I weight M3 as the favorites because I think that they have more veteran status with them and they have a cleaner idea and like trends as far as like their play style and what they want to do and how they go about their win conditions.
So RNG will also play a team called Unlimited Potential, and that's not like a joke about CLG. There's actually a team called Limited Potential, and the genius of it is this is the team which had Hart on it, who is an OGN champion, has been in the finals twice, been in the semis of Worlds, and he's one of those players who got kind of consigned to LSPL Hell, which actually, as a little plug, Kelsey did a video about, I think it was like 5 things Reddit gets wrong about China. Something, the wording was along those lines. If you look on her Facebook or Twitter, you'll find it. Karen Moser. And one of the things she stated was essentially one of the things that's quite hard to explain to Westerners, which basically goes like this. LSPL is called the secondary league, so that in itself will suggest to you like, oh, it's the second division. Okay, it's like the under league where if you're not good enough, you play there, and then if you're good, your team gets into LPL, and great, you're in LPL now. It is in a sense, but only in the most loose sense. It's actually kind of an excuse to get around. Okay, think of this: when all those LCS teams wanted to have a second team, but Riot said you can't have a second team, so they got a challenger team, right? Imagine if getting a challenger team didn't just mean you support this challenger team for a while and then you're going to have to lose it after a split. Imagine if you literally just had 2 LCS. LCS West and LCS East, and you could just have 2 teams with equally good players if you wanted, and put them in both leagues and have double exposure. And there was even televised on LCS East, and people followed LCS East, and they had their own fans. That's basically what LSPL is. So even though to us in the West, we're like, oh, I guess Hart just disappeared off into some dungeon in China and will never be seen from again. He's now actually playing in LPL, and his team presumably must be half decent. So what do you actually make of Unlimited Potential?
I have a really small sample size with Xiaogu and Unlimited Potential, the two new teams from LSPL that got into LPL. I do have some experience, obviously, with Heart, their support player for Unlimited Potential, and their jungle, Amy. Amy it's kind of like Insect. He's like a baby insect. He likes to go super ham. He has this problem, though, where he goes a little bit too ham, and he costs his team pretty much huge across the board. From what I can tell, it's kind of hard to dig up information on their two solo laners, Long, and I can never pronounce their mid laner's name, Chaoyong. They're very mechanically skilled. They don't really understand like rotations or anything like that, and so what they do is they wait for Heart and Sketch to like get super fed and then carry the game from the bottom lane. Is kind of what the trend that I've seen. Like the three Chinese players on the top of the map, they're just really mechanically gifted, and it's kind of like a World Elite scenario, except there's two Xies as opposed to like a Xie and a Luca. They just beat their lane, or they do these crazy plays, and then eventually like Heart shows up on Thresh like a big playmaking champion and just like, follow me, and he goes ham, and they all go ham, and they just win the game. It's weird.
So who do you think should win out of Unlimited Potential and RNG?
It's like two baby teams facing each other. There's this, I don't know if this comes across, there's this conception from like Kelsey and I that teams from the LSPL up into the LPL, they excel within the first 20 minutes of the game, because in LSPL, if you watch those games, they're pretty much smashes or snowballs pretty much every single time, and it's about like pulling the trigger in these big team fights and having like just really good mechanics and just mechanically brute forcing someone. So what happens is when you put an LSPL team like Snake or King of last split against a more veteran style LPL team, the early game looks fantastic, but as soon as you get to that late game, when it's about macro shot calling, when it's about wave pressure, when it's about making the correct decision on map movement, that's when they start to fall apart. I don't think that's going to be the case, just because RNG, again, they're also kind of two baby teams, Gamty and King. They're still relatively new. They have more veteran experience. Actually, it's hard to say because Heart's on the team, and I believe that Heart's actually the shot caller. So I don't know. I think that's a 50-50 coin toss. Like, it's just going to be who outplays who. Like when your team strategy is just mechanically outplaying someone, that's a 50-50 that you're going to win or you're going to lose. And unfortunately, that's a lot of these bottom tier LPL teams' strategy, is just to mechanically brute force, as opposed to coming with like a specific draft strategy, a specific composition strategy. It's these big AoE team fight comps, and they just smash into each other.
So Unlimited Potential's other game allows us to talk about a team which you surely are very excited about, which is Invictus Gaming. Now, Invictus Gaming didn't make any roster moves, they didn't upgrade a position, they didn't change anything. They went out of playoffs without much, without much of a bang. But thanks to EDG and the rest of China being cretins, they magically now have a chance to be the best team in your mind, right?
Yes. It's so excellent. So obviously every single roster, or at least most of the rosters in the top teams, have changed, like PYL being missing, EDG benching Coro and removing Pawn, and OMG obviously taking leveling a going off the board. Invictus Gaming, it's their chance to rise up and to conquer, and I think that that's pretty much exactly what they're doing. Nothing's changed. They're playing the same play style. They're brilliant in their draft phase. Cacao is still incredibly strong. Rookie looks fantastic. So pretty excited about IG.
Do you think they can actually win LPL this season?
No. Unfortunately.
I mean, in your mind, they're one of the few teams, Froskurinn, where you have to admit this. You think they have no weaknesses, any as in player positions. True? You think every single player is good, like above average, if not really good?
Zatai is the weak point, I think.
Okay.
Obviously, into the top lane position, his champion pool. I mean, he's branched out, but he's not a master of those champions, as far as like Gnar and Mundo's becoming popular again. So that's an issue. I think Cacao and Rookie are super solid right now. I think we need to work a little bit more on working within a team dynamic. It's almost like you have these three separate parts. You have Kid and Kitties, and they're just the consistent bot lane. They'll do their thing. It's excellent. And they actually do better in the team fights than I think pretty much anyone else on the team does. And then you have Cacao and Rookie. So you have bot lane, and then you have like the mid jungle, and then you have like that random guy in the top lane, Zatai. And so you have these three disjointed parts, and they kind of work together, but not as smoothly as they need to win the LPL or to be the best in LPL. I think they'll definitely be a top contender, but I don't think they'll win it.
Is there an issue where One factor you do have to take into account with all these teams is that the first split, everyone always used the excuse in LCS, okay, when a team didn't make a change, like, oh, well, that's because the first split, they were getting used to the new roster. That's always everyone's excuse after Worlds, because of the off-seasons when people make most of the moves. Then they'll say, like, oh, and so for the second split, now we're going to build on what we did. And I always usually say that's bullshit, because by the end of the first split, you actually usually know a team's identity and how good they're going to be, and they're usually at about the level, right? But the difference is, I can give a little bit more credence to that in Chinese teams, since they literally were integrating people who don't speak Chinese into their teams, and radically different playing styles, etc., etc. If IG just take what they have now, but just the team performance improved 10%, that's all that changes, just 10% team performance improved, would that make them like an LPL champion, an LPL finalist?
Yeah, I would say that they definitely have the tools.
Like, how would they be able to go up against like the SK Telecoms of the world?
Ooh. I don't think so. Like,
what would they lack for?
Like if you think about SKT's bot lane, Wolf and Bang, I just think that they're far superior to Kid and Kitties. So Kid and Kitties, I really like that bot lane. I think they're super consistent, they're serviceable, and they're strong, but I don't think that they're amazing. And when you start branching out to international competition, you're facing amazing bot lanes.
I mean, sometimes you face TSMs as well, but and sometimes you face Fanatics. But yeah, you're right. You're right. Otherwise, what you meant to say was if you face Koreans, you're facing. Yeah, okay.
So I think Kakao and Rookie are definitely solid, and if they could integrate their team play, like if Kid, Kitties, Kakao, and Rookie were just like the seamless machine and how they went about everything, I think that would be amazing. That IG would definitely be an international contender as far as being a top tier elite team. I don't know if it's ever really in their skill ceiling. And I'm a big fan of like Kid. Like I really like Kid. I just don't see him as a god tier imp, deft. Even Uzi at Worlds, Name, Bang. I think Bang's incredible. AD carry player. And so unfortunately, I just think that their skill ceiling is just not there to be elite. Do they have a chance to win LPL? Yeah, if they increase their teamwork and they're able to team fight better and be more cohesive as a unit. If they can shore up Zatai's champion pool, if he gets more comfortable up there, he's got 44 games to do it. Then yeah, I think they can win LPL. As far as international success, I don't know.
With all of that said, if you had to place your money now, is IG going to Worlds?
Yes. I think it'll be EDG, Invictus Gaming, and LGD.
Okay. So IG plays unlimited potential. This should be a win for IG.
Yes.
Now, IG's other game is a rematch of the quarterfinal match between Vici Gaming and IG. So let's talk a little bit about Vici then. Another team that didn't really make... Here's one of the teams where... Okay, Snake made that move that I said is a great move.
Yeah.
Why, God, why? Why couldn't you be the one who goes to Vici?
That would have been excellent.
Why, God, why? Why is that not allowed to happen?
They picked up, like... I think they have a sub in every single position except for jungle and support, because obviously you don't need to sub Mata and Dandy, but they have 2 top laners, they have 2 mid laners, and I think they have 3 AD carries. Any
of them any good?
No.
No, of course not.
I don't think they're going to change.
Why would they be?
I don't think they're going to change their top laner at all because he's a very famous streamer. I think they just brought him onto the brand to stream for them from the bench. So I think it's going to definitively be carry every single time. Carry, I think, is actually salvageable from the Vici Gaming solo laners. Again, it's one of those scenarios where if I wasn't facing the best top laners in the world, I'd probably be pretty good at this game. But unfortunately, Carry is, so it hurts. He's also very, very green and very, very new. But a lot of the times when you look back at Vici's past games, Dandy actually does this, I call him Dandy's ducklings. Like, he does this thing where he'll focus and he'll play around Carry, and Carry will get super fed on Rumble, and they'll just snowball a game. Like, Mata takes care of the bot side of the map, and Dandy, like, completely forgets about Hatong, but he goes up to Carry. And so you have, like, these two, like, Mata and Dandy raise these 2 little baby birds, and they just carry the game for them, and then Hatong, like, split pushes or something. Vici Gaming have this problem right now. Stylistically, they were one of my favorite teams just because I thought it was so bizarre that they were created in the LPL. They did this thing where Hatong would play Twisted Fate, and Dandy would ward up a map area, and if they saw anyone on the wards, instead of rushing towards them and getting a pick, they'd run away. And they'd play a split push game, and they just out-rotate people and take towers and get like a huge surplus of gold, and then barely win team fights off their surplus of gold because they just don't know how to team fight very appropriately because their mid laner is fairly weak when it comes to like mechanics and play style and champion pool. Right now, they're trying to do this really weird thing where they team fight, and it's not working for them. So they sacrificed their rotational strengths for a disjointed roster, and now they don't have, like, they're not good at anything. Like, Vici Gaming only win when they go back to their rotational play style. So it's heartbreaking to watch.
Explain this to me. In China, do fans not just look at Vici, Chinese fans, and say, well, he fucking sucks, why is he on this team? Are there not interview questions like, oh, what do you think of Hitong, is he underperforming? Like, how are the teams themselves seemingly blissfully unaware that they've got a shit player on their lineup?
I think they're pretty aware. Invictus Gaming has been the most candid about kind of like their players' performance. Obviously, if you look back before Zatai, it was a top
Vici,
player.
you mean? IG.
Yeah, it was a guy named Pokemon. And Vici,
okay.
What did they say? Like, in interview questions, they would be asked, and a kid would say something like, Pokemon's the MVP because he didn't feed this time. So, like, there is humor within the teams, and obviously, like, the Chinese fans can be really bloodthirsty and just, like, rip players apart. Going, for one. So, yeah, they're... Mata and his AMA, some of his interview responses, they know and they make remarks about it, just nothing has changed. I don't know. I mean, obviously, this could be a failure on management. Hatong is the obvious weak point of that team. Even before Carry, even before the ADC, which right now they replaced Vasily, or not replaced, they say they're rotating. They rotated Vasily with this guy named Endless, and there's no comparable difference there. They're pretty much like the same, so it's hard to say like Vasily's better than this guy or Endless is better than this guy. It's a complete wash either way, but Hatong definitely needs to be kind of a point of conversation about what are we going to do about this guy, because it's falling apart in pretty much every aspect. If
the team doesn't do anything about him, if they just keep him in the team, is it possible that everything else in the team improves enough where they can still somehow, like, okay, this is a more extreme example, but LGD managed to overcome their issues with Xuen. Is it possible they could somehow still be a potential LPL champion?
No. I mean, what team have you ever known in the history of anything? Actually, maybe Cloud9, where the weakest member was the mid laner. Like, who dominated the region.
Yeah, dominated, that's true. But even then, I don't know. I mean, Lemonation was not that much better than Hyde, potentially. And the whole point is, when they were really dominant initially, like, actually, their dominance kind of drops off as High becomes less and less relevant individually within the region, you know. I think it is the kind of a correlation between the two. It's true, that is a rare example of it. But then again, think about how they did it. They had, like, by far the best shot calling, an actual, like, proper team play where they could come back into games and they could figure out a way to overcome small leads and play from behind. Things that normal teams don't do, unfortunately, in the West. So
make changes during a game.
So in this respect, could Vici do that? Could they have such impeccable ability to play around, like use the map to their advantage and find good fights and stuff, that they could still somehow make this work?
I don't believe so. I mean, you'd think if it's going to be possible for anyone to have amazing shot calling and vision control, it would be the team with Mata and Dandy on it. Unfortunately, from what I can tell from interviews and just hearing things, Mata is very displeased with this team. He's not enjoying his time in China. So he's kind of not checked out, because I definitely think he's still trying, but I think it's very clear that he's frustrated. So as far as, again, like, you have the two languages. So if a team has to completely overcome their lack of any talent in the mid lane with extreme shot calling and beautiful vision and just like flawless execution, you're already competing against a language barrier, and you're competing against like team morale and a lot of frustrations. And there's been multiple examples where Mata just is super frustrated and very upset.
So in that actual matchup, IGVG, who do you think wins?
Invictus Gaming.
Okay, we now arrive at a chance to talk about if the EDG moves were bad, they were bad just because they were unnecessary, okay? Like, but at least you kept the players. You still got the players, and in theory, if everything goes to shit, you can just put that old lineup back in and pretend none of this ever happened, okay? It's all, you know, mum and dad are going to get back together again. You know, we'll forget about all those fights and raised voices, and it will all be a family again. That's all I want, son. But OMG have gone too far, Froskurinn. Like, they have actually not only changed lineup, but inexplicably changed some of the players, and in a manner which actually ruins all of the charm of OMG, and yet doesn't seem to address the problems. Because as far as I can tell, we'll go through the moves. They've essentially just created a subpar Starhorn Royal Club for Uzi to live in again. Thoughts?
I mean, that's a fairly accurate assessment. So what they did was they benched the top laner going.
And who did they bring in instead? Who did which good top laner out of all? Remember, we've been talking about all these top laners in LPL. Which top lane did they bring in instead of Going?
Well, it's this guy named Xiang, and
no. He's a mid laner, I believe. Actually, he was a mid laner like a year.
He's also a support.
Oh yeah, mid laner and support player. But what is his third best role? Like top? He can do top as well.
He's playing top for them. You guys may remember him because he played at All Stars when Cloud9 took a game off of OMG. He was the mid laner when Pomelo was the jungler. He's a Syndra main, is what he's really well known for. He had a short, brief stint last split for OMG as their support position, where he played like pretty much exclusively Morgana. And now he's top laner for them because OMG, I guess, benched Going because Going wasn't paying attention in practice. He was duo queuing with a lot of girls. I guess there was a report that his cell phone had to be taken away because he just wasn't paying attention in scrims or practice or anything like that. He was texting girls. So.
Okay. The curse of the jawline, that will be known as the downfall of his career. Yeah.
In the jungle, they benched.
He was like I was jumping over walls, but after Worlds, I was smashing through them like the Kool-Aid man. I think that's probably one of my best inadvertent jokes there, Froskurinn, but okay.
They benched leveling in the jungle. They picked up a solo queue. Oh my god, I can't believe you said that. They picked up a solo queue jungler, Shui, not Shui. Yeah, I think that's how you say it. It's not. It was pretty funny on the English broadcast. We had a couple of casters call him Jiu.
Yeah,
that was pretty good. As far as I can tell, he obviously can play things like Gragas, so he plays the meta picks. Doesn't seem to be too outstanding in one way or the other. Uzi, I guess, had a disagreement with him already about his play style and how he wanted him to play for the team and how he wanted him to kill for him.
Oh, goody. This actually is Starhorn Royal Club. Mark II.
And then your mid laner is still cool. Your AD carry is still Uzi. Things that should be noted. Cool looks like he's performing much more consistent. Although, please don't play Azir. I don't know why people hype up Cool's Azir. His Azir is not awful. But comparatively to like the skill ceiling of really good Azir players, it's not there. Which is unfortunate because it's like a big power pick right now. Uzi has branched out his champion pool. He's playing more Sivir, and he plays it really, really well. It's like PvE. He's got like perfect farm. It's disgusting to watch, as opposed to just like these big hyper carries. Still playing Vayne, but he always opens up with the Sivir. And then in the support position, player? Totally spacing. Who is their support player right now? Oh, right, the new guy. Yeah. That's all I could say about them. You got these two new, the support and jungle, who come from solo queue. Amazing came from their LSPL team. And they're kind of like not a big enough sample size to see where they really fit in the scheme of things. It doesn't look too amazing or impressive so far. And then you have Xiang in the top lane. And Cool and Uzi are playing really well.
What do you think? Is there actually... Let me think how to phrase this. Is this a set of moves where they maybe will consider reverting any of them? Like one of the things to note here is, okay, Going and Loveling are technically benched at the moment, so maybe they could come back. But Cloud, no one's mentioned this, but he has been completely shanghaied. Like, he doesn't exist anymore, basically. Like, no one knows. He no longer exists, Froskurinn. Where is Cloud?
OMG as an organization actually does a really good job in retaining their players. And like Pomelo does charity work for OMG on behalf of the organization.
I think they were doing fucking charity work, letting him in the games.
And they and they have like a huge
he should give back.
Huge extensive staff of players. So I mean, Cloud, I haven't heard anything about him leaving the organization, and just knowing that OMG's passed with these players, that they retain them for very long periods of time, and they find them other jobs within the organization to do. So
sometimes different positions.
So I'm sure Cloud's still hanging around, but no, I haven't really heard anything about him.
So why is Uzi still to this day not paired? I mean, Cloud seemed like the dream guy. Like, you know that whole thing in the West.
I didn't like him.
Where I always wanted Forgiven to be with like a Vander, an Edward, a Cassing type player, where like aggressive player, and then they just wreck the lane and then they'll win the game off those advantages. Cloud was like the chance for Uzi to have this sort of a support player.
The problem that I've heard, Uzi was the shot caller for Starhorn Royal Club. He does a lot of shot calling for OMG, and he likes things a very peculiar way.
Particular?
Thank you. Sometimes I speak English, and
It
most
might
of the
be
time
peculiar
I don't.
as well, because it's quite peculiar that the fucking AD carry makes all the shot calls.
Well, I heard this, like, okay, I'm trying to think. So this is how Starhome Royal Club worked. Insec and Uzi would do, like, the macro shot calling, but Zero was, like, this buffer for Uzi, whereas, like, the team would give calls or give information, like, flood it into Zero, and Zero's only job was to check on Uzi. So, like, they'd tell him all of these things, and Zero would be like, is that okay with you? Do you want to go mid and farm? Are you sure? Are we okay? Can we do this team fight? And he'd, like, be this telephone back into the team. Well, Uzi says we should do this. I don't know if that's 100% true. That's what I've heard. And the big issue with OMG was you had Going was a shot caller. Loveling has a very specific way that he likes to play the game. He does a lot of shot calling. Cool was the only player that was like, I don't care. Just do whatever. Uzi is a shot caller, and Cloud was a shot caller. And originally, Cloud was benched from the team because he wasn't getting along with Loveling, that they were two competing perspectives on the game of how they wanted to play it. So I would only assume that it would extend to Uzi and Cloud, that Cloud would say, no, let's do this, let's go here, let's make these plays, and Uzi would be like, no, I don't want to do that. And Uzi is the highest paid player, so OMG is going to prioritize the guy that they're giving all of their money to.
If they only use this starting lineup, so let's say they don't put any of the other players back in, won't this be the downfall of OMG and Uzi? Like, and remember, Starhome Royal Club, what people forget is the first Starhome Royal Club, the one that went to Season 3 Worlds, was a very different matter. They at least had some players that had like tenure and certain, like, very serviceable in some areas, sometimes very good in very specific areas, like Whites was very good at laning. So they had certain strengths, and then they had Uzi, who was like a burgeoning star. Yep. The next Starhome Royal Club was almost a fluke in terms of they just put this mix together, and it just happened to figure out at exactly the right time and play this one style but make it work. And somehow everything held. The meta held, the players held, in terms of what they were able to do, like just play Orianna mid all the time. And somehow it all worked, and they got the best possible result you could get from it. If you try this again, and now with players we haven't even heard of, aren't the odds that this is going to be a bad season for OMG?
That's what I would say. The problem is it's like, when I'm coaching a team, I always tell them, I don't care if you make a stupid call as long as all 5 players do the stupid call. Like, you'll have much more success if you're all just doing something wrong together versus doing something right split. And that's kind of like what OMG were doing. They had too many different directions. They were trying to put their goals in too many different ways, playing too many different styles, and just didn't work. So they finally chose a direction. Either we're going with Uzi or we're going with Leveling Cool and Going. And so far, like, comparatively, OMG from last split and OMG from this current split, this one already looks better. Obviously, there's not a very large sample size to go from, but they're at least cohesive as a unit, and they have like they have an identity, they have a play style, they have things that you can expect from them. They're more rotation focused, they're more about the ADC, they're more about the bot lane. Cool is being more about disengaged champions. It's all about Uzi. So like you said, it's kind of like a pseudo Starhorn Royal Club in a sense. So when you compare them from like last split to this time, like this OMG is stronger. When you compare OMG from last year to this OMG last year is 10 times stronger. So it's about what ceiling can this OMG with Uzi focus actually achieve.
So if that's the setup, then it's all on Uzi. So does Uzi shine this season? Is this the time when we see him become like a monster in LPL? And I mean, that's the thing. He's still playing Siva half the time. So what's actually is he? This is going to be Uzi just going ham this split? Do you think?
It has to be. If he doesn't, then that's OMG's chances. They've put all of their eggs in the Uzi basket. And he has a pretty fair track record in summer split to make shit happen. So, I mean, it's not an awful gamble to take, but when these teams, when EDG, fixes their lineup issues, when LGD gets PYL back, when Snake has more cohesion with you, when Invictus Gaming gets more cohesion as a team, just continue to build off of all the synergy that they've already created over the last split. I mean, where does OMG fit in the top half of the bracket then?
In the off season after Worlds, there was all these rumors like, oh, Loveling might just retire, Cool might retire. Well, Cool actually supposedly was going to go to other teams as well. Going might retire. So these are the old guard. These are the players who've been in OMG. They're the faces of OMG. It would be understandable if they just said, okay, like, that's the best I'm going to do in my career. I'm probably never going to win Worlds. I mean, I'm done at this point. I'll just become a streamer or whatever. That's why when Going underperforms, it makes sense why they then just say, like, okay, maybe it's time for you to step away. What's the deal with Loveling, though? Do you think Loveling's just done? Do you think he's just moved into a backseat role now?
I have no idea. it's really sad because when I talk to people who are just now getting into the Chinese scene, there's this perception that Loveling is a supportive jungler. And obviously that comes from the last split because he's trying to play to Uzi, and that's not Loveling. Loveling built his career on being a hyper-aggressive, very creative pathing style of jungle. So, like, to see this evolution, or this, like, I'm going to call it a de-evolution within the last year of just his complete style and just everything that was amazing about Loveling, and just watch him, like, slowly sink down to the bottom has been really depressing. And then to have it end where he's, like, benched.
Even though I appreciate what you were trying to say there, just as a little note for everyone in the world out there, you don't actually call it de-evolution. Like, that's not what it is. Because here's the thing. Evolution doesn't actually imply that you change in a positive way. It just implies change. So it's still evolution, even if they become worse. They just evolved to become worse. So just a little note. Just a little note. Listen, what we're going to do is, Froskurinn, you're going to teach me Chinese League of Legends. I'm going to teach you English. And between the two of us, we'll both get to a higher level in our careers. Okay, I feel like we've got a good dynamic going on here.
I've been watching a bunch of Criminal Minds. I don't know if you watched that show. It's pretty much like a shitty cop show, but it's about like serial killers, and they use this phrase called de-evolution for when the psychopath starts like going crazy on rampages.
Okay.
Yeah.
So OMG's games this week are against RNG and WE. These should be winnable.
Yes, I definitely think OMG will win both.
Which brings us to our last two teams to talk about.
It's time to talk about King.
Yeah. Now, first things first, I've been referring, sometimes overtly, sometimes just alluding to across the show, that perhaps in China, not only does a type of corruption exist in terms of our Western biases and how we think of how things should run, but it's not even done in a way, there's no subterfuge, okay? There's no like cleverness in how it's done. Literally, think of this, okay, guys. So you know that in LCS, Winter Fox got relegated, right? And TDK got into LCS. Now imagine if the guy who owned Winter Fox had just bought TDK the moment they won the game and said, I'm just going to move all the Winter Fox players onto TDK. They are now called TDK. Everyone in the West would be like, what the fuck? Like, this is bullshit. Like, they qualified, they went out the league. This can't be allowed to happen. Rito, please. Nick Allen, fines, like everything. People would go apeshit. That literally happened in LPL. Star and Royal Club got relegated. The team that beat them got shanghaied the fuck out of there. Some of them got to go on other teams, admittedly. And they just put all of the Star and Royal Club players onto that team and just said, yes, this is Team King. And they're all back again.
It's really important to note that the reason why, because they bought two teams, they bought Gam2 and they bought King. Yep. The reason they chose King is because King has more turn or circuit points.
Yeah, because they made like the final of some tournaments and whatnot.
So they have a higher chance at going
Which makes it even more rigged. The idea that you're literally doing it for the circuit points.
It's funny that you bring that up because, like, obviously I've been too far into Chinese League of Legends that when I saw that move happen, I didn't even think twice about it. I was like, oh yeah, that happens.
Yeah.
Okay, I expected this to happen. Like, we even made jokes about it on China Talk. We're like, yeah, they'll probably just buy a roster spot.
But now that we take that away, isn't this good though? Because you know our depressing thing for Froskurinn was like that lineup on paper looked like it had some potential, like it could go somewhere, but it had all those problems. Couldn't get Nami in time, had to use all these fucking scrubs for so long. When you finally get the team together, they only get a few weeks before Insect loses his fucking mind, and then ability to walk. That turned a bit tragic there. And then they get relegated in the most unconvincing fashion ever, while Zero is like carrying like a champ, but he remembers, oh yeah, I play support, you can't carry. So now they've got another chance for us going a full 44 games with this set of players. Can they do it?
Oh, they're already off to a really bad start. So what they did against EDG is they didn't even start their lineup. Insec is nowhere to be found. Zero is nowhere to be found, and Name didn't play in the first set. And I thought they were maybe doing this because they knew that they were going against EDG, that they're going to lose anyway, so like why waste their time? Why not give you got 44 games, why not give your subs some booth time? Then we come to the next set. So Nami finally gets to play. Still no Zero, still no Insec. They play this guy named Sync Dream. Not the best support in League of Legends. Doesn't have a great performance. Pretty much known as a Morgana-only player. Didn't get to play. I don't know. Name tried to carry out of
those
his
exist
mind.
in LPL now, Froskurinn. That's how far we've come. Morgana only. That's
Morgana
what a brave
only
new
plays
world we live
LPL.
in. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing. Kelsey wrote, again, another shout out to Kelsey. She wrote this great article where she like briefly tries to identify all of the teams so you can kind of like figure out which team that you want to watch. If you want to watch, what did she say? Like Hercules on 2 teams. Like you either pick World Elite or you pick King because Spirit and Name are trying to carry out of their minds and it's just not working for them. Name played out of his mind on Jinx. It was incredible to watch. He almost got the Baron steal with the rocket. He got a Dragon steal with it. He almost got it the second time. He flashed forward and he just dumpstered Dade like on this Jinx pick, but just couldn't do anything for his team. It was one of the saddest things to watch. And then when he plays Urgot the very next game, he just gets bodied. They dive him like 2v5 every 3 minutes. It was absurd to watch.
So basically, the whole King scenario comes down to will they ever get that 5-man lineup in the server?
One day. It's sad too because when they were like all the interviews came out from the Starhorn World Cup players and Cola was like, you know what, I think I really need to go back to LSPL. I don't think I deserve to be on an LPL team. I want to work my way back up. And then Korn was like, wherever Cola goes, I'm going to follow him because when they were thinking about benching me, this guy stood up for me. And Name was like, I don't give a fuck. Give me a team. I'm taking it to Worlds.
Do you think if they do get the lineup sorted that they will be decent?
Yes.
Whereabouts should they be?
If Name plays how he played in that first set with Zero, and Zero plays how he did, like on the back, yeah, like that's one of the best bot lanes in LPL. That is absurdly good. I don't think they'll be a top like 3 team. I think they'll kind of be like middle of the road. Like they'll sit over Vici, but probably like fifth or 4th. No, 5th or 6th.
Okay.
Still not making it to Worlds.
So, the last team we need to talk about, Xiaogu.
Xiaogu!
Basically, better known as, oh, Swift is still alive.
World Elite 2.0.
Swift is still alive. Now, Swift should be a good jungler in LPL, right?
He's a god. Yep.
But is he in, like, Spirit World?
Yep. He's like a baby spirit. Pretty much Xiaogu's only playstyle right now is feed Swift, watch Swift carry. He's a really good jungler. He's really good. I don't think he's better than Spirit, but we're approaching the same level of like just hard carry potential. And the fact that it's all about the jungler, like literally just give Swift every single kill and watch him carry.
What and does the team actually have any chance to win some games? Do you think this split?
Yeah, I do. I think that they're very similar to Snake last split. They're very much about a 5v5 team. So you have their bot lane, which is TNT and TCT. TCT is okay. TNT is formerly known as Avenger or Quiet. He's been around the scene for a really long time. His relationship with Uzi is actually really interesting just because they've played on multiple teams together as well as like across from each other. And he's always had a reputation of being a very strong ADC. I think the bot lane is serviceable. Their jungler is a god, and Doinby, their mid laner, I think is a little bit overhyped, but he has this really interesting role where he's almost like a secondary support. So what you'll see is TNT and God, this is obnoxious. TNT and TCT will just kind of like either win their lane or they'll go even, like they never just get crushed. And they can like make plays when Swift goes down there. But Doinby will always roam. It doesn't matter if he's on LeBlanc. It doesn't matter if he's on Morgana. He'll roam and he'll follow Swift wherever he goes. And he just supports the jungler. And Swift gets all these kills. They 5v5 and he just like carries them to victory.
So they're going to play against... So are you actually saying that they'll be one of the worst teams overall, though?
No, I actually think they'll probably be middle of the road. And even for the initial part of the series, until teams kind of figure out what they're doing with their rosters, especially with all the changes, they might break into the top part for a short time. I think they're really strong mechanically. Their strategy and macro play suffers enormously, and their win conditions hinge on Swift getting off. But if Swift goes off, they're a better World Elite, whereas you have the potential that Spirit can just hard carry a game. Swift has that same potential, but across every single position, you have a better player. So you have a better Luca, you have a better Mystic, you have a...
What about King versus Xiaogu then? Who wins?
Xiaogu.
And then King versus Snake?
Snake. Unless King... If King gets their Starhorn World Cup roster, I think they can beat Xiaogu. I do not think they'll beat Snake, though.
Okay, pick for me a team that people wouldn't be hyped about, wouldn't think of being really good, but they're going to be the surprise. They're going to do the best of all the kind of...
Xiaogu. I actually think if people really are getting into Chinese League of Legends and they want a team to be excited about, I think Xiaogu actually has a ton of potential. I think they definitely need to work on their macro play, but right now in the meta, that's not as important. Like the first 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes of a game are so important to snowball. And these guys know how to snowball really efficiently and very effectively. And Swift is a ton of fun to watch. So I think if people want to have a team that's really fun to watch, that could be very surprising as far as the standings are concerned, and have a ton of room to grow, like to watch like the evolution of a team, I think Xiaogu is the one to go for.
And who is the big name who's most likely to fall off and do really badly? It's OMG, right?
I was going to say it's probably Uzi or Cool. I think it's probably OMG, and I think Uzi will run into problems.
Let's do the games then. So look at the schedule. We need to pick out the Drexin Filthy Casual Killfest Award. Which game will that be?
Filthy Casual. Either Invictus Gaming versus Unlimited Potential, or... No, it's going to be Invictus Gaming versus Xiaogu. Cacao versus Swift.
What about the Monte Cristo boring rotations, win without kills, technically perfect game? Which will that one be?
Invictus Gaming versus Vici.
Ah, okay. So you're still riding that train. I see.
That's all they can do, Thorin.
Yeah?
If they don't play a rotation-based game, they just lose. Like, Dandy have to pick Nunu, and they have to get Sivir, and he just, like, blood boils him around the map. It's excellent.
Now, which game are you going to... I think I know the answer for this one already, but which game are you going to pick as what should be the best game of the week? Come on, there's only two candidates for this one, surely. Isn't it EDG Snake or EDG LGG?
I was looking at EDG Snake.
Which one are you thinking? This one?
If LGD has PYL, then that would be the game to watch, but I don't think he's back from his surgery yet, so I think it has to be Snake versus EDG.
That should be the best set for the week.
Yeah, and I think the storyline there is really cool as well.
Okay, that's the end.